Hey YouTube community, it's your guy, JuiceMan3941, back with episode 34, this one entitled Watchwords. Watchwords meaning lazy and uninspired. But before I continue this broadcast, I want to apologize to my wonderful subscribers and some of the people out there that watch me that haven't subscribed yet. You know who you are. And the thing is, I've had some things go down in the last few weeks, so that made me kind of reevaluate what I'm doing here on YouTube. More importantly, the job that I was working at decided to give me the old fucking axe, the old chopping block, the old shit can. But in many ways, they did me a wonderful favor, and I started work the very next day at a new job, framing and building homes, which is 10 times harder than what I was doing before, but I am getting paid better. And it is got me on a day shift instead of a nighttime shift, which is why I've had to adjust to that and accordingly such. And you were watching me with this little title screen, my wonderful and lovely, sexy Maya, my siren from Borderlands, and I absolutely love this game. Although there are things about it I dislike, I still feel Borderlands 2 is really best played with people because I feel like there are many times where the difficulty spikes are so high that it's sometimes very difficult to progress in the game. But I've always been a big fan of the Borderlands series and look forward to playing the third one whenever that comes out. And while Battleborn has been getting hit or miss reviews, and I absolutely think Overwatch is a better game, I still want to pick up Battleborn because I don't know. I like the Gearbox games. I even like Aliens Clone Marines. Yes, you can comment on that later, but I have reasons behind that. But that's a whole nother episode altogether. Today is a Watchwords episode, and I haven't done one in a while, called Lazy and Uninspired. Now, many of you out there probably read reviews and watch reviews, and they always talk about developers being lazy and game levels being uninspired. But let's talk a little bit about those words. They're thrown out there so much, but sometimes they're not really giving the context. The developer is lazy. Yes, go play the latest Madden. Yes, EA, I will contribute to being lazy because, as I've stated before, developers, it takes time. You have to go back in and rewrite a bunch of stuff, reanimate things, and do things, and you may not always be able to do that in the 10 to 11th month time period that the game has to come out. But sometimes reviews talk about how they were just lazy. They didn't want to do anything extra. Now, everybody absolutely knows for a fact that I love Dynasty Warriors and I love Omega Force and what they've done. And at times, I've actually will say, because I will tell you this, I'm a fan, so I feel like I'm allowed to, to say this because I can criticize a game series I like. Sometimes they are a little lazy. I have just got done playing about 2-3 hours of Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires, a game that I continuously play and I find a joy in. But sometimes they are a little lazy in Empires because sometimes things happen for no reason. Like, yes, you might build up a friendship with somebody, either through interacting with them or not, and you just kind of work with them, and then all of a sudden they're your sworn sibling, either a sworn sister or a sworn brother or whatever. But not much comes from that other than the fact that your friendship never drops and nothing else like that ever really happens. And I just don't understand, like, okay, well, what real benefit does that do for me? It's no different than when you get married in the game. Yes, you can get married, and yes, at some point you'll have a child. You'll try to grow up. You can play as your child. It's kind of neat to see how they put the two, you and whatever character you decide to marry, together and create their own version between the DNA of both your parents. But at the same time, it makes me go, well, okay, well, that's cool. It's a great concept, and occasionally, you'll always be in marital bliss, and you'll get an award or something, a weapon or something cool from your spouse. But generally speaking, to be perfectly honest with you, not much kind of comes from it. I think in the terms of it's just kind of put in there as to be put in there. But I don't think, I feel like that Omega Force was a little lazy and not fleshing out that a little bit more than what it actually is. The meat and potatoes of the Empires mode is either being a ruler or not. And I think another thing that is interesting when I look at 6 empires, which is really 5 empires, and 8's really 7, because they don't count the very first game that was on PlayStation 1. It's kind of like in 6, as you gain levels, you could actually play the game and continue to play it, or even play the free mode at your current level in 6 empires. But in 8 empires, it doesn't happen. You gain levels, but when you play free mode, you're back to your normal level 1. It was a little lazy on their part to do that. Why not? Why can't I keep my levels? I'm literally leveled my character up. I want to keep that person where they're at. Because Empires, as a game, 8 Empires, when you play campaign, it can take a long time to get from the beginning of that campaign to the very end, regardless of whatever choices you make. And I don't really sometimes understand that, But lazy is a subjective term as well. People used to tell me about Evolve, how they felt like Turtle Rock was lazy in their development. Turtle Rock worked on the game for about 3 years. And you have to remember developers a lot of times, and Turtle Rock is no stranger to this, as a matter of fact. Evolve started one way, and then they scrapped a lot of it to restart the game and then change things and as it goes before they can finally get to the final product. And again, 2K Games is like, hey, you got to put the game out. So, I don't ever want to say that all developers are lazy. I think what happens is things change. What I would have liked to seen in Evolve, even though I absolutely love the game as it is, I mean, I really do, but Evolve, ladies and gentlemen, needed to be like a hub-based world, where you pick a territory to conquer on Sheer, and you go and fight that big giant monster, and once you do that, you're done. As a matter of fact, it should have been more like a first-person Monster Hunter game, or a Tokuden Kiwami style game. That Monster Hunter style of game, where you can kill animals and collect plant life and use that for research and things like that. Evolve could have been this really cool game where your home base is a hub world, and you could have had all these different hunters that you can play as with different skins, and people pick a hunter and you walk around, you can interact with people, take side quests, and go to Sheer. That's not how the game came out, which would have been badass if it did. But I don't want to say they were lazy. They actually restarted Evolve a couple times and down the procedure to try to figure out what they wanted to do with the game overall. It's not that they don't have a clear and or defined vision of how the game was supposed to be. I don't consider that lazy. The word lazy in a review comes up with they're talking about either lazy, mechanics, or lazy, they're not giving us more stuff in, let's say, a sequel. It oftentimes comes up in a sequel where the developer didn't want to put all that much effort because it was a sequel. And considering games like COD and Battlefield and your Maddens and your NBA Lives of the world and your 2Ks and different games that have to come out every 10 to 11 months, you could say that they had to be a little lazy because they don't have the luxury to go back in and redo everything. I think it's lazy sometimes, though, is a poor excuse from developers. And lazy as a review word is, I think, a watchword, because we have to watch that. What reviewer is saying, why are they lazy? Where does that term come from, and why do you think they are? A lot of times the term gets thrown out there. The developer was lazy, but they don't really explain the reasoning behind why they're being called lazy. Excuse me, I was yawning there, my YouTube community. Time for a little beer in the throat. You see, the point is that I'm making with this watchword, and why it's a watchword, is because when people say that, you should red flag that. Especially a game you haven't either played, or maybe a game you have played. Where does the context of that word come into play? When you say the developers were lazy, but in one aspect, the gameplay, the developers were lazy in the gameplay. Well, in what way? What really should have been different? I don't know. Can you tell me? I have no freaking clue, people. Let's talk a little bit about the second watchword that I always look at, and this is a suspect word for me too, is the word uninspired. And usually that gets thrown into this. Uninspired level design. That's what you hear the most. Uninspired level design. And sometimes I wonder about this. I could easily say, and I'll just throw this out here, I think GTA 5 is a great game, you know. And I could easily say that the level design for Los Santos is uninspired. You know why? Because it's just a city. That's it. I've played a dozen games. Dozens and dozens of games that you can roam around in a city. It's a city. It's uninspired. It's just a damn city. That's all it is. Parking garages, big buildings, skyscrapers, you know, rich neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods. I mean, you could technically say that's uninspired because there's nothing inspiring about that. It's just a damn city. Who gives a crap, right? But no one ever says it about that, right? The word uninspired has a watchword because I think, you know, uninspired level design, uninspired gameplay I hear. Well, what do you mean by that? If it's a third-person shooter, it's going to have certain mechanics. It's going to have, you know, some kind of cover system or a run-to-cover system. It's going to have a blind fire. It's going to have a peek-out mode where you can shoot stuff. But you can't really say that's uninspired because that was inspired by Gears of War, which Gears of War's cover system go back to Kill Dot Switch. And further back to Winback, who was the first console game, if not the first game, to actually create the snap to cover, pop out and shoot thing. The people who made Dynasty Warriors. You can thank Omega Force for that, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. They invented the cover system. So my point is that uninspired level design bothers me too. I was playing Lichdom Battle Mage, which has its issues, yes. And some people said the level design is uninspired. I'm like, it's medieval. It's fantasy. You sort of expect a certain look to it, you know. Especially a fantasy medieval setting. You know, the stone and wooden kind of cabins, castles with banners, uninspired, you know? You could easily say in the Game of Thrones, and I love the Game of Thrones in a TV series, the setting is uninspired. Yeah, because it looks like a Tolkien Nest setting, which looks like a Dungeons & Dragons setting, which looks like... It's a watchword because it's a subjective word. Okay, what do you mean uninspired level design? Explain further that. Why is it uninspired? Does it mean that they were just kind of like, whatever, just, look, it's an ice world. Hey, guys, the guy's wandering around an ice world, so make it look like ice, and then this area is going to be desert, and this area is going to be jungle. Uninspired, you know? And it's just ridiculous to me, because I think those are watchwords, lazy and uninspired, especially when they get into the first, if they're together. It's a subjective term. Was, you know, Bungie, you know, for example, lazy in their gameplay? They just didn't flesh it out better, which was improved with the Taken King. But were they lazy, or just because they had never worked on an MMO, they weren't really sure exactly how to approach the situation? They didn't want to be too Halo because they were trying to get away from that, but they didn't exactly get away from that. And that's what I'm talking about. Lazy and uninspired. See, that's what America's about, my friends. It's about Texas and lazy and uninspired game design. Well. See, and that's what I mean. You know, you just can't like say lazy and uninspired all the time in the same world without a context, because my perception of that word or my take on those words may be different than somebody else's. Well, how were they lazy? How was it uninspired? And a lot of times they just say those words, but they don't say anything afterwards. Like, give me the context of why you're using that words. Borderlands, for example, is a good example of this. Borderlands, somebody could easily say, well, it's uninspired. Pandora's, there's a desert area, an ice area, a rocky area, a grasslands area. The vehicles are pretty much the same thing we've been using for a while. It's a first-person shooter. It plays like every single first-person shooter. You have a machine gun, you have a rocket launcher, you have a revolver, you could easily say that Gearbox was lazy and uninspired if you stop and really think about it. But were they really? In what context could you say that? Because I don't think they were. Pandora is Pandora, right? Yes, it would have been really cool in Borderlands 2 to go revisit areas in Borderlands 1, but Pandora is a big planet. It's huge. So it's kind of like you're going to have different areas. The feel has to be the same. Pandora has to feel like Pandora, and Pandora does. That's why you can't say they were lazy or uninspired. You can't, because they can't just change everything, right? And that's kind of how I feel about those two words. They're suspect words to me. They're watchwords. When I watch a review and they don't say that, that's great. When they do say that and they don't really say anything over it. Now, I'm subscribed to Angry Joe, and I love you, Joe. Love what you do, buddy. I'm in the construction business too now, just like you. Sometimes you like to say the developers are lazy and uninspired, but you don't really elaborate on why they were lazy or uninspired. Why? What does that mean? You say they were lazy and uninspired. What do you mean by that? Explain. Let us extrapolate from that. I want to know, what do you mean by lazy and uninspired exactly? What do you mean? Explain. It's uninspiring because of X reasons. It was lazy because of X reasons. Saying that they weren't is one thing. I go back to a game I used to play on 360 that I really like, although it's flawed to hell and back, is the game Fuel. I can say they weren't uninspiring, but they were lazy because, there's not that many camera modes. It has an archaic progression system. It was almost like they were so concerned with being in the Guinness Book for having the largest gameplay area at the time, which it might still be. It was 5,000 square miles. The game was the size of Connecticut. It was huge. You could drive 2 hours in real time and not hit a wall. It was absolutely really crazy to drive around. And while there wasn't much to do in that game, I still really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really interesting game, and enjoyed it regardless of. And just because it was different for a driving game at the time. But yeah, I felt like they were a little lazy. But again, that's my opinion. And when people say things are lazy and uninspired, those are subjective terms to me. And you gotta do that. See, that's terrible. That's terrible. That's crazy. That's terrible. Crazy. Terrible. It's just like, see, that's what America's about, my friends. It's about Juice Man on the YouTube. See, and that's the thing. When you look at those two words, you could really say that about any game. You really could. And honest to God, you could easily say that about any single game or any single developer out there, because they're just borrowing off each other at this point, right? They really are, Very few games ever truly innovate to the point when you're playing it, you're like, I have never played anything like this before. Even Doom, which just recently was released, I played the beta. I have not picked up the game yet. They compared it to Unreal. But you could look at the game and say, yep, lazy, uninspired. You could really, really nitpick it apart. And that's why I don't think those are good words to use in a review. Ladies and gentlemen in the YouTube community, and I'm subscribed to a lot of you guys, if you're reviewing something, don't use the word lazy and uninspiring. Just don't use it. And if you're going to use it, and if you're going to use those words, explain to us, the audience, they're lazy because XYZ. It's uninspiring because XYZ. And even if you have to draw direct comparisons, because every game nowadays can be compared, holy shit, it seems like every game that comes out has role-play elements in it. Call of Duty, Battlefield, Borderlands, you name it, it's got it. Even Alien Nation is basically a futuristic Diablo. It's a fantastic game, and I don't think I really did the game justice on my last episode because that game is fantastic. There's events and bosses, and it really feels like a futuristic Diablo. It just really does. It's a fantastic game, only on PlayStation 4. You got to pick it. $20. It's worth every penny. There's lots and lots to do in that. And the point is, lazy and uninspired is just, I think, when people do use those words, you got to kind of be like, wait a minute, that's to me a red flag. Anyway, I'm glad that you were able to tune in. If you're my subscribers out there, thank you for subscribing. Remember to hit that like button. You know what I mean? Hit it. Hit it like it's going out of style. Hit it like a redneck beating his wife. No offense to rednecks or wife beaters. Okay, offense to wife beaters, not rednecks. Anyway, I am the Juice Man 3941. You were just now watching my episode 34, Watchwords, Lazy and Uninspiring. I'm sorry I've been away for a while, but I've had some things to think about and some life changes with the jobs and stuff. And again, I'll see you on the next episode of Gaming Roundtable. And as always, gamers, good fucking gaming.